My name is Linora Tias. Right now I'm in the Eri Kibbutz, this horrible place that so many people found their death, but also so many survived. I was here during Saturday. Okay, I need to run.
Israel is at war. 2 weeks into the war, United Hatzalah is now joining the efforts with the IDF to the next step when the IDF asked for United Hatzalah's assistance by using our ambulances.
As part of the war effort here in Israel, United Hatzalah are helping the IDF with medical supplies, equipment, special defibrillators and monitors, but also with ambulances. Today we're delivering 5 ambulances. You see here, 5 ambulances that are going to the Israeli army. All these are going to the front.
To treat and help civilians and soldiers in combat fighting for our homeland. We wish our soldiers Godspeed, and us in United Hatzalah, with the thousands of volunteers, will continue operating throughout Israel, saving lives throughout this war, on this war over our home.
Did you know that when you're experiencing a life-threatening emergency, your chances of survival decrease by 10% every minute that goes by?
Yeah.
That's why we're always on call.
We are all volunteers for the most amazing cause in the entire world, ready to get to you faster than anyone else.
No matter where we are.
When people need emergency medical attention,
We, United Hatzalah volunteers,
transform from citizens to
Superheroes. When an emergency hits,
Whether it's a car crash, heart attacks,
allergic reactions,
choking,
a terror attack,
a woman going into labor,
time,
time,
time.
time makes all the difference.
between life and death. So how do you make sure you're fast enough to save lives?
United Hatzalah.
It's like Uber, but for life-saving.
Let us show you how it works.
Report of a car accident.
When you experience an emergency and call United Hatzalah, a dispatcher will take your call within 3 seconds.
United Hatzalah, what's your emergency?
Once we get the call, our state-of-the-art system springs into action. Our advanced GPS-based dispatch algorithm finds the nearest United Hatzalah volunteer and contacts them immediately.
in big cities, in small towns, even in the wilderness.
There is always a United Hatzalah volunteer ready to race and save your life.
And the whole thing is fast.
so fast.
From the moment the call comes in until volunteers are there to save your life,
It only takes 90 seconds.
90 seconds.
90 seconds?
90 seconds.
Damn.
We achieved this incredible speed thanks to an incredible fleet of every kind of vehicle.
Ambulances, boats,
the all-terrain vehicles, e-bikes,
City transformers,
Helicopters. And the coolest one of them all, the ambucycle.
ambucycles are motorcycles decked out with all the equipment that we need in order to save lives.
and because they're so small and fast, they can zip past traffic jams or navigate narrow streets, ensuring nothing gets in the way of treatment.
This whole crazy, brilliant idea started in the head of one crazy, brilliant man.
And I couldn't do this alone. Our team of over 7,000 volunteers save lives all over Israel and beyond.
and best of all, it's free.
No bills, no medical debt.
Serving people from all backgrounds.
Every nation.
Every race.
Every religion.
I'm an Arab, a Jewish volunteer to save my father's life. Because of that, I decided to join United Hatzalah.
We can all agree that saving lives is the most important value.
And the results speak for themselves.
Newborns brought into this world by Hatzalah volunteers.
People that get second chance of life. Grandparents who see their grandchildren grow up.
Over 2,000 calls per day. That's over 600,000 calls per year.
Plus missions all over the world.
Because helping people
is what we do.
We are the volunteers.
The medics.
The phone operators.
We deliver babies.
And she's my mom.
Because I am a volunteer in United Hatzalah, I saved my mother's life.
We are friends.
Strangers.
Family.
And everything in between.
Jews, Muslims, Christians.
Ordinary people.
Extraordinary people.
People just like you who decided to make a difference.
To help each other.
To save lives.
We are United Hatzalah.
United Hatzalah.
United Hatzalah.
United Hatzalah.
United Hatzalah.
We are United Hatzalah.
And you are too.
When Hamas's attack upended thousands of lives, it was Sabbath. It was also an important Jewish religious holiday, Simchas Torah. Israel's emergency medical teams had to spring into action. Israel's volunteer EMS organization, United Hatzalah, sent 100 rescue vehicles, ambulances, and mobile intensive care units south, along with armored vests and helmets.
Nothing has prepared us for an attack on this scale. The people that we're treating are our neighbors from our communities. Many of the people injured amongst them are volunteers. Some of the people who were taken hostage into Gaza are our volunteers.
On the front lines, including United Hatzalah, Israel's largest nonprofit emergency medical service.
We need to buy more special monitors. We need to buy more ambulances. We need to buy more of these armed vehicles, which I never thought United Hatzalah, which is a volunteer organization, is going to have to go rescue and save people with armed vehicles.
Volunteer groups are stepping up their efforts on the ground.
In the first 24 hours, we were able to mobilise to the area 1,700 volunteers, opened a field hospital and an improvised landing strip. Really apocalyptic scenes. When I saw myself, piles of bodies on the side of the road.
Initially, I spoke with one person that was there. The family was trapped in a safe room. And they basically, the father had his hands and legs blown off. We're trapped, and I was able to hear rapid gunfire behind them. And they were trying to say that he was losing consciousness and they needed some help to evacuate.
Treating people that are in critical condition is intubating them, doing chest decompressions all the time. When I met two kids that just were held hostage, after that they said to me, I saw my parents get killed in front of me. I'm hungry. I haven't eaten in the last 12 hours.
There have been some ambulances that have been shot at. We've had 2 volunteers already killed, unfortunately, and another few injured, and 2 of them are missing. We're not sure what's happened to them. They may have been kidnapped as well.
The toughest 4 days in my experience of over 35 years in EMS. We saw the heroism come out from volunteers, working under fire, bullets flying over their heads, missiles exploding, and pulling out people, saving lives, doing medical procedures under impossible conditions.
Seeing things that I can never unsee. I've treated injuries that I wish I never have to see again. I've transported bodies in the shape that I don't want to ever have to do such things again.
United Hatzalah has been inundated with calls for help. Nearly 90% of their supplies was depleted within the first 2 days.
One after another, severely injured, gunshot wounds, severely injured.
Suddenly I had a soldier from the Special Forces. He came out with 2 babies in his hand, and he gave it over to me, one of the babies and the other baby for my colleague. The babies were just screaming, and they were dehydrated. And when he gave me over the baby caught on so hard to me. He felt he was in safe hands. It was so emotional. It's an expression you can't even express.
Again, this is non-denominational. We're treating Jews, Muslims, Christians, everyone in Israel who needs it. And we have volunteers from all of those denominations as well. And we're really working to try and save lives.
Go to IsraelRescue.org to support the good men and women there. Ellie, thanks so much for joining the program.
Thank you so much. God bless all of you for supporting us.
You too, brother.
The President of the United States came here to Israel to support this country. You uplifted the whole spirit in this country.
הרמת את הרוח של כל המדינה הזו, אומר לו נשיא איחוד הצלה, שרבים ממתנדביו נפגעו וסייעו בהצלת הפצועים.
Last 4.5 weeks was the hardest weeks of my life.
I am involved with Hatzalah for 35 years of my life. Millions of people were helped by this organization. And unfortunately, we deal with the terrible things like baby stroking and heart attacks and strokes and car accidents every single day, and terror attacks. If you count all the terror attacks that I saw all my lifetime together, it wouldn't be nothing compared to what I saw on October 7th, Simchat Torah. We're continuing for the last 4.5 weeks dealing with the regular emergencies and with war emergencies. The worst ever you could imagine of Hamas terrorists, or worse than ISIS. We saw it in our own eyes. You all saw it on television, but what we saw we will never forget. But we couldn't have done all of this work, saving babies, saving mothers and women and soldiers under fire, and getting prepared for, God forbid, even worse if the Hezbollah join. This is all thanks to our incredible supporters from Chicago. Chicago, I have a special part of my heart to you guys. I love Chicago. I've been there many times, and I want to thank a couple of people and organizations. I want to thank Anshe, Emet's congregation. I spoke there many years ago. Anshe Shalom B'nai Israel, Chicago Synagogue congregation, Camp Isaiah Israel, Temple Shalom, Bernard Zell, Anshe Emet Day School, and Chicago Jewish Day School. I also want to thank Rabbi Siegel and Cantor Brook, Mimi, and the entire Anshe Emet team. Our dedicated community leader, led by and big supporter, and many other organizations, but United Hatzalah supporter and leader, Jeff Ader. I want to thank our new representative, Lisa Beth. She's incredible, and thank you for all the work you're doing. And of course, Ambassador Michael Oren for being ambassador for Israel, but also for United Hatzalah. You're incredible. We couldn't have done this all without you. Toda Rabah.
My name is Cantor Rachel Brook, and I'm the senior cantor here at Anshe Emet Synagogue. Please rise and join me as we sing Hatikva, the national anthem of Israel. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiya ulfatei Mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia, od lovda tikvateinu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liotam chofshi be'artzeinu, eretz Zion Yerushalayim, liotam chofshi be'artzeinu, eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
Erev Tov. I'm Michael Siegel. I'm the senior rabbi of the Anshe Emet Synagogue, and I'm so glad to welcome you here this evening. And on a personal note, I want to just thank you for being here. There is something very healing to be standing in a room with Jews singing Hatikva together. I welcome you to the Anshe Emet Synagogue, congregation now celebrating its 150th year. We have a long and proud Zionist history. strong involvement with the building of the Jewish state, and enthusiastic support over these past 75 years of statehood. This evening, we are very proud to join with United Hatzalah, and we want to acknowledge all of our institutional supporters, but all of us are indebted to Jeff Ader for all he does and making tonight possible. As the sun went down this evening, we finished Shloshim, the 30th day since the pogrom of October 7th, which took the lives of 1,400 men, women, and children, and the taking of more than 240 hostages. Over these 30 days, the Jewish people have become mourners. And during this period, Israel has gone to war against an enemy that is the modern-day embodiment of Amalek. Over these 30 days, a number of innocent people have died in Gaza, and the responsibility for their horrible deaths and the destruction that has taken place is that of Hamas. Over these last 30 days, we have witnessed a rise in hate directed against Israel and the Jewish people the world over. That is shocking by any standard. But that is not the only story to tell of these past 30 days. Together, we have witnessed a divided Israel come together in extraordinary ways. United Hatzalah is an organization which represents the best of Israel. It brings together the widest spectrum of volunteers from every part of the Jewish state. Jews, Christians, Muslims work together. They are the most courageous first responders. And what they have done during this terrible Shloshim is remarkable and a true act of Kiddush Hashem, the sanctification of God's name. And please join me as we acknowledge their important work. As the sun sets tonight, we are aware that Thursday is Kristallnacht, the government-sponsored national pogrom of the Third Reich that took place 85 years ago. For Jews and the world, history has come knocking. Of that, there is no question. What is up for discussion in the world today, in this challenging moment, is how to interpret that history. We could not be more fortunate than to have Michael Oren, a former ambassador of Israel to the United States and one of the greatest Jewish historians of our time. He is with us this evening to help us better understand the meaning of this moment and hopefully the path forward as well. As an ambassador, Michael Oren was instrumental in securing U.S. support for Israel's defense and upholding Israel's right to security and peace. He was born in the United States, educated at Princeton and Columbia. Dr. Oren has been a visiting professor at Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown. He was a distinguished fellow at the Shalem Center in Jerusalem. His last two books, Power, Faith, and Fantasy, America in the Middle East from 1776 to the present, and 6 Days of War, were both New York Times bestsellers. In Israel, Ambassador Oren served as an officer in the Israel Defense Forces, in the paratroopers in the Lebanon War, a liaison in the U.S. Sixth Fleet during the Gulf War, and an IDF spokesman during the Second Lebanon War and the Gaza operation in January of 2009. He acted as an advisor to Israel's delegation to the United Nations and as the government's director of interreligious affairs. And one more detail: he was a gold medal winning athlete in the Maccabiah Games. During these days of Shloshim, we have had the opportunity to hear from Michael Oren on national news stations. He has represented the people of Israel, the state of Israel, and the situation in remarkable ways: articulate, honest, strong. What a blessing it is to welcome Michael Oren to Anshe Emet.
Thank you. Toda, Rabbi Siegel. Toda, Cantor Brook. Thank you, Jeff, Jennifer, for everything you do for everybody. I just got to say this. I've known Jeff for, 20 years? 21 some amount of years. During the Second Intifada. We think always it's the darkest. This was dark, too. Second Intifada, there was no tourists, no investment. No one went out of their house. One day I got a call out of the blue from this guy named Jeff Ader. Will you have breakfast with me at the King David Hotel? No, there was nobody at the King David Hotel. They were thinking of selling off the King David Hotel for private rooms because there were no tourists anymore. I brought a couple of businessmen over in the middle of Intifada. Would you come over and have breakfast? And what do I say, no? So Jeff did it again and again. Always there, always there. Tammy, thank you for getting me up here. It is very surreal to be with you tonight. I got to be very honest with you. 24 hours ago, we were sitting in our bomb shelter in Jaffa, and rockets coming in. They came in usually 2 or 3 times a night. We have a bird's eye view because our rear window overlooks one of the Iron Dome batteries that is guarding southern Tel Aviv and Holon area. So the rockets go literally over our house. And we get used to this. Our cat has not gotten used to it, though. Every time these sirens go off, the cat actually beats us into the bomb shelter. I don't know how the cat has internalized that that's where you're supposed to go when the sirens go off. So it's very strange, I must admit. So I'm going to try to make sense and not to be too rambling. A month, Shloshim. A month ago, I was at my mother's house in West Orange, New Jersey, getting ready to attend my high school reunion. How bizarre was that, right? I just come from giving a series of talks around the United States, most recently before that in Texas, in Dallas, where I talked about my feeling that a war was coming to the Middle East. And my basis for saying this had to do with the U.S. effort to effect a rapprochement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And why would that trigger a Middle Eastern war? Because the Iranians were desperately afraid of a joint Saudi-Israeli front, both a strategic front and an economic front, and even more afraid of the possibility of Saudi nuclearization. And that was going to be one of the components in this peace agreement. And I think the Iranians looked at Israel and found that we were deeply, deeply divided among multiple levels, left, right, Ashkenazi, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, religious, secular, every way we could be divided, and we had been for many months, with thousands of reservists said they wouldn't report for duty, and huge protests in the streets of Tel Aviv and major cities, hundreds of thousands of people protesting against the government. Iranians saw this and said, listen, this country can't defend itself right now. They looked at America and saw America also deeply polarized and committed to isolationism, the only issue in Washington that achieved bipartisan support between Republicans and Democrats was isolationism, not to get involved in another Middle East any entanglement in the world, certainly not in the Middle East. The Iranians saw their fears, they saw their opportunities, and they were going to act on it, and I strongly felt that we were going to war. And there's only one thing worse than being a false prophet, and that's being a true prophet. That's terrible. Read the book of Jonah. He had that dilemma. And who would think that 28 hours, 40 hours after giving this speech in Texas, the war would break out? It caught me in my mother's house, and it had that moment that every Israeli fears, that if you're abroad, you open up your cell phone, and there are all these messages saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And you know that something terrible has happened. And I looked up, and I saw. And what happened was unspeakably awful. Little did we know that it was only a fraction that morning of what was actually going to come out. They were talking about maybe 100 dead, maybe 20 people taken hostage. We didn't know. Nobody knew. But I knew I had to do two things. One was to make every connection I had in El Al and get onto that plane that night, get on the first plane out. The second thing was a relationship with a wonderful fund in New York, with whom I've had a relationship for many years. Every time a crisis breaks out, this fund hires a PR firm, and that PR firm places me on television. And already on the first day, I had done, even on the lounge at Newark Airport, I was already doing interviews on CNN and MSNBC. And landing, 10 hours later, went right to work with that. And that was the month of interviews. Some of you saw them. You should know that prime time here is 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning in Israel. That's why I look the way I do. I'm only Jeff's age, and I look like this after the month. But doing that gave me a ringside view of the way this war was being treated by the West in the media, and by the way, CNN was fantastic. Anderson Cooper was fantastic. Eric Burnett was fantastic. Jake Tapper was fantastic. Even MSNBC was very, very good. BBC, not so much. Any British? Sky News, no, not so good. But we did media all over the world and see how the Hamas's military tactic serves its media, its diplomatic, and legal strategy. I shall explain. Hamas knows they can break through our fence. They can take over 22 cities and farms and settlements. They can massacre 1,400 of our citizens and burn them and mutilate them and rape them and behead them and take over 240 hostages. And they can bombard us with thousands of rockets, but they can't destroy us. Hamas knows it. Can't destroy us, even with all that. What they can do is create a situation where they kill us, and then they get us to kill them. Because Hamas is going to use its civilian population as a shield. All right? That's why we're trying to get the Palestinians to move from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to the southern part, and why Hamas is trying to stop them all the time, sometimes at gunpoint, because it wants them to get killed. And so Hamas wins 2 times. That's the military tactic. They kill us, we kill them. And we have Iron Dome, so it creates disproportionality, the D word. And immediately disproportionality translates into protests. Protests throughout Europe, protests on your campuses, protests in your cities. And that, in turn, creates pressure on government. So the military tactic then becomes a media strategy, which then becomes a diplomatic strategy. And before you know it, nations are voting against us in the General Assembly. They're going to vote against us in the Security Council. And that's when the diplomatic strategy becomes a legal strategy, when the Security Council imposes a ceasefire on the State of Israel. Now, understand this, and I am not exaggerating when I say this. A ceasefire for the State of Israel means death. The death of the country. It means that Hamas gets away with mass murder. It means that we cannot return The 250,000 Israelis who have been removed from their homes, who have had to evacuate because of this war, and Jeff's going to go visit them tomorrow, some of them. We can. Who's going to go back to the area around Gaza if Hamas is still there and is now restoring its power, is recycling, getting ready to strike again? We had the number 3 man at Hamas come out the other day and say, I don't care what they do to us. We're going to do this the second time, the third time, the fourth time. You're going to send people back there? Same thing's true up in the north. Who's going to go live in Kiryat Shmona? Who's going to go live in Metula? So that's a ceasefire. But even beyond that, a ceasefire means that we cannot restore our deterrence power. Oh, I'm good. Thank you. We cannot restore our deterrence power, which means that all of our enemies in the region, particularly the Iranians, will internalize that they can hit us with impunity. And when they do, and we go to defend ourselves, the international community will tie our hands with a ceasefire, and we will be dead. Simple as that. So if there was any role or function that I felt I was fulfilling by being on TV all night, was this: to provide time and space for the IDF to act. Time and space. I wasn't going to win anybody's hearts and minds, but time and space. Put this over. And so far, Todah L'El, we've been able to give the IDF some time and space, but it's not unlimited. And we see now already pressures to impose on Israel or force Israel to accept humanitarian pauses, which are just mini ceasefires, which could easily expand into very large ceasefires. And the people of Israel, in particular the hostage families, are adamantly opposed to these pauses because they feel that those pauses are the only leverage which they have, which the State of Israel has, on Hamas. Hamas has not even allowed one Red Cross worker to visit those hostages. We don't even know the people who are listed as hostages. We don't even know many of them are hostages. Many people are still listed as missing. And we think they're hostages. We think they're hostages. We don't know. During the day, I went on the Israeli news. The Israeli news is very different than the international media. The Israeli media is sort of like American media in 1942. Okay? They are tales of heroism and tales of pain, but you do not see what the world is seeing, which is the increasing obsession and almost total focus on Palestinian suffering, particularly of suffering of children, and the protests around the world, and the anti-Semitism. You don't see that. And in between that, I went to Shivas, funerals, and visiting the families of hostages. And I have another hat. I'm the head of an NGO that supports our border police, particularly the bereaved family of border police. 47 policemen were killed, and women. I went to a shiva for a 19-year-old policewoman who, with her own hands, shot 3 terrorists and saved an entire village before she herself was killed. People come from different backgrounds, from Ethiopia, from Russia, from Uzbekistan, all gave their lives to save this country. Israel. Israel is in a deep sense of trauma. In addition to losing now 1,500 people, in addition to having so many thousands of our daughters and sons fighting for us tonight as we sit here, they're out there fighting as we're sitting here. Just know that there was a sense that the state had let us down. The state had let us down, that there was a covenant that had been broken. The state of Israel is based on a covenant between the state and the Jewish people, founded exactly, almost to the date, 3 years after the end of the Holocaust. The state of Israel came into being with the promise that the Holocaust would not happen again, that Jews would not be massacred again with impunity. And we didn't live up to that covenant. The intelligence did not predict that Hamas would do what it did. The army did not show up in time. And many of the state's organs did not function very well, which is why we were all visiting hostages' families, because many of the families had not been visited by the government yet. And that was unconscionable. There was also a sense, a conception of what Hamas was about. And I got to plead a little bit of a, mea culpa, makel chet, all right, is that I was part of the government. And I was deputy to the prime minister, and one day the prime minister called me, and this is about 2017, and said, I got some bad news for you. You're going to be in charge of Gaza. And what was my assignment? To look and see whether Israel could in any way improve the quality of life for the people of Gaza. And we examined the possibility of water reclamation and desalinization and electricity. And then I learned about Gaza. And what I learned was this, that everything you know about human decency, about civilization, everything you know when it comes to Hamas and Gaza, throw it out the window. Here is an area in which the Iranians, and the Iranians, of course, the principal funder and backer of Hamas, and the owner and operator of the Palestine Islamic Jihad, the other terrorist organization there, Iran will fight Israel to the last Palestinian. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, who's in the 18th year of his 4-year term because he will not run for election because he knows Hamas will win in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, he will fight Hamas to the last Israeli. And Hamas itself does not give a fig for the people of Gaza. Nothing. Every year I learned, Hamas uses and loses hundreds of Palestinian children digging its tunnels. They send them down. I saw one year they lost 300 kids digging tunnels. They don't care. Sand collapses. They have hundreds and hundreds of miles of tunnels underground. They go down sometimes hundreds and hundreds of feet, and they send the kids down to dig these things. We had a border crossing. It's been destroyed. It's called the Hebrew Kerem HaShalom, which is kind of an ironic name because it means the vineyard of peace. And Kerem HaShalom had a capacity of 1,200 large flatbed trucks full of food, medicine, clothing, whatever you want. Everyone's telling you about the blockade of Gaza. I was in charge of the blockade of Gaza. The blockade of Gaza is about arms, not about food, not about medicine. Blockade never starved out anybody. Don't listen to anybody. But they said we could move 1,200 flatbed trucks into Gaza every day. Hamas would let 400 in because Hamas wanted to keep a level of humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Imposed by Hamas, it keeps the people hungry, it keeps the people angry, and it keeps the people dependent on Hamas. That's what you're dealing with. Everything you know about human behavior, throw it out the window when it comes to these people. And yet still, within the army, within the intelligence corps, we believe that somehow Hamas could be incentivized to be less of a terrorist organization and more of a governing organization. So we gave them wads of Qatari cash, and we let 20,000 Palestinian workers out of the Gaza Strip every day to work in our fields, thinking that this would give Hamas something to lose. They didn't care. They didn't care. They care about one thing and one thing only. They care about killing Jews. And they talk a lot about liberating Palestine. Did any of the thousands of Gazans who came across that border on the 7th of October, did any of them stay around to liberate Palestine? No. They massacred, they slaughtered, they raped, they burned, and then they ran back into their tunnels. That tells you a lot, by the way. They didn't try to hold a piece of territory. No. This is what we're dealing with. It is for that reason that Israel cannot accept a ceasefire. We have to fight this battle. I don't care what the international ramifications are, and I'm saying this as a diplomat. We'll have to withstand it. We just have to. And whatever the cost, Israeli society has internalized that there'll be a cost in terms of our soldiers. This has all been intensely, intensely personal. There is not an Israeli that I know, and many people in this room who do not know, people who have been killed, people who have been taken hostage. It was the rabbi who married my daughter, had 2 sons, both of them reserve officers. The minute they heard about the fighting on October 7th, they both left their families, left their kids, got into a uniform, went down to the Gaza border, and neither came home. Buried side by side with their father saying Kaddish over them. It is Tamar Kedem Simantov, who grew up with my kids, was in the same scout troop, the same karate group with them. She, her husband, her 3 young kids, shot dead. Soldiers who have fallen. The son of my business partner in Washington, D.C., his son's best friend, Ofer Bavla, who didn't go to college, but his parents are Israeli, went off, joined the Israeli army, was home having a vacation on that Shabbat, heard about the fighting, got onto a plane, and was killed by a Hezbollah rocket in the north. Story after story after story, intensely personal, but we have no choice. I've been asked again and again over the course of the month, what is really war in the past, being the historian, what is this similar to? In the first article I wrote, again, on the plane coming back to Israel on October 8th, was to compare it to the Yom Kippur War, because obviously, October 6th, 1973, October 7th, the 50th anniversary. I'd just come and given a couple of talks about it. And there was that initial comparison between the surprise attack of Egyptian and Syrian forces on October 6th and the fact that the intelligence didn't predict it and what it did for Israeli society. That was obvious. Or the Six-Day War, okay? After the first week, everyone was talking about, the war is lasting 6 days, and we've already lost twice as many people as we did in the Six-Day War. Different wars. But the fact of the matter is those wars were fought, for the most part, far away from civilian areas. Very few civilian casualties, handfuls. And by men mostly in tanks and planes and uniforms. This war was completely different. This war was fought in our homeland. And the major casualties were civilians. This war has only one comparison, and that is Israel's War of Independence. And particularly the first months of that war, May, June 1948, when 6 Arab armies penetrated our borders, penetrated our cities, and massacred our civilians. And massacred in many ways in the same way. Mutilated them, raped them, beheaded them, same way. And this war very much is a war for Israel's independence. It is a war in which we will have to establish our independence from terror, from fear. I believe at some point we're going to have to address the threat from Hezbollah in the north, which, by the way, is 15 times larger than the threat from Hamas. They have 150,000 rockets and an army that's twice as big that has spent the last 10 years massacring Syrians. And you saw what they did to 500,000 Syrians. Imagine what they do to us. That's an intolerable threat for any society, any whatsoever. It is Israel's war of independence, but it's also more than that, or worse. It is a war against the Jewish people. It's a war against the Jewish people worldwide. It's a war against the Jewish people of Chicago. It's the war of the Jewish people in London. It's the war of the Jewish people on just about every college campus I can think of. I have many scenes in my head from this war, but perhaps the profoundest was a night I went down to near the Gaza border and visited my old paratrooper unit. And these kids, they're children with guns, just beautiful, beautiful children, were there on October 7th, one of the first units to respond. And they'd lost members. They'd seen sights that no human being should ever seen. You heard some of the people from Hatzalah talk about it. And we sat and we talked. We talked about fear, what it feels like to be in battle, how do you get over these fears. And I was very moved by it. But I came home and I did a conference call with the pro-Israel group on Cornell University, who had basically been in lockdown. The Center for Jewish Life in Cornell had been shut under threats. And what I saw in the face of these students was the exact same fear that I'd seen in the faces of the paratroopers, exact same fear. And I told them that, they weren't carrying guns, the people up in Ithaca, but they were our soldiers too. They were on the front lines in every way, in every way. And it really drove home the point to me that this is a war not just against Israel. It's not just against the Jewish state, it's against all of us. It's against the Jewish people, all of us. If there's any ironic, tragic, silver lining to this war, is that in some bizarre way we owe Hamas a thank you. Bizarre way. And what is that? It took the events of October 7th and October 8th to remind us, a state that had been deeply divided before that, a people that had been divided so much before this, to remind us that we are one nation. We are one people. We are a mishpucha. We are together. And I have seen that togetherness in the last month like I have never, ever imagined it. Ever imagined it. I've seen the togetherness of volunteerism, of something between 80% of all Israelis going out and volunteering in some way, giving clothes, giving candy, giving blood, picking tomatoes, hosting evacuees in their homes in every different way. Extraordinary. I've seen the American people in so many ways, particularly your president, Joe Biden. And I'm not going to get too political here, but I may get a little choked up, but I know Joe Biden very well. I work with him. I work with his staff in Washington. And I know he cares deeply about Israel. He cares deeply about the Jewish people. In 50 years nearly, I've been working in the field of U.S.-Israel relations, both as a practitioner and a historian. I have never heard a speech like the president's speech. We were listening, we were in front of the TV, everyone's crying. Tears streaming down our face. And the man not only talked, the man did. He brought two of the largest naval forces on the planet to help protect us. And they have protected us. They shot down missiles that have been fired at us that would have killed Jews. And this is against at a time, again, where the only bipartisan issue in Washington is opposition to getting involved in a further Middle Eastern war. Amazing. Incredible. I've seen all of this in the last month, and it gives me great hope. It gives me great optimism about the future. So much of that volunteerism, so much of that spirit, so much of that love and courage is embodied by Eichud Hatzalah, the United Hatzalah. I've been deeply proud to be associated with this wonderful organization for years now, and I was not in the least bit surprised by the way these hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, without a second hesitation, ran to the front of these battles. Some of them didn't come back. And saved lives. Jews, Arabs, religious, secular, everyone together saved these lives. And I also saw how the Hatzalah warehouses, which are a sight to behold, I want to tell you, they're huge, they're the size of baseball fields or football fields, emptied out, emptied of bandages, tourniquets, everything. And I don't know if we're going to mention this tonight, but even to meet the most immediate needs of Hatzalah, the next month is something in the order of $30 million of equipment we need. And what can I say? Every contribution to Hatzalah saves a human life. It just does. Simple equation. It just does. We don't know where this is going. I don't even think this is the end of the beginning. This battle is going to take a long, long time. Ferreting out Hamas from these tunnels, from these bunkers, rescuing our hostages, and I do think there's a good chance we can rescue these hostages, and then meeting the challenges from the north, perhaps from Iran as well, is a great struggle. When I say this is an Israel war of independence, this is what I mean by it. And anti-Semitism will continue to rise everywhere. We, all of us, have to remain united in this way. We have to show the world, as we've shown the world again and again throughout 4,000 years of our history, that we can't be defeated. That in the face of the most seemingly insurmountable obstacles, we will remain a people. We'll remain that mishpacha. And we'll do it by standing up to the anti-Semites. We'll do it by raising our voices politically, fighting in the Churchillian sense, in the Senate halls and in the newspapers, in the media studios, the television studios, and on the campuses. We will do it. And we will not only survive, we will come out of this stronger. I'm absolutely, absolutely convinced of that. I know that. It's that spirit of Hatzalah is the spirit of all of us. That's why we're here. That's what brought every single one of you here tonight. And I don't represent the state of Israel anymore. I'm not an ambassador. I'm not a member of Knesset. I vote when I can. But I think I can say on behalf of the people in the state of Israel, to every single one of you, Toda Rabba. Toda. Am Yisrael Chai. We have some questions, please. Any question is good. I'd say shoot, but it's a bad, inappropriate. Yes, we got, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Oren.
No, thank you.
Can everyone hear me? Yep. No? As you see, Bob Klaus made a great point. Wars begin. I'll use my military word, okay? Bob Clausewitz said, wars begin militarily and politically. Now, my uncle, who's an epidemiologist in Israel, made a great point. It's like the seed, this poison seed of incitement. Things that they're saying about us lead to words lead to action. What can be done to check this incitement? It's It's like the black community taking on the KKK. What can we do?
Well, you can do it the same way the black community took down the KKK. There's legal recourse. I don't understand why people who are calling for the death of Jews, people who are supporting an organization which is recognized as a terrorist organization by the United States of America as well as by Europe, I don't know why those people aren't arrested. I don't get that's not free speech. That's murder. I don't get that. I don't get how is a college president who does not condemn anti-Semitism, defend her students unequivocally, unreservedly, I don't know why that person's still in this job. I don't know why a university which allows Jewish students to be threatened and harassed, I don't know why that university should get a cent of contributions from anybody. For example, we are not powerless anymore. We have power, and we have to use that power. I feel a little vindictive because for years I've been involved in this debate about what to do about anti-Semitism in America, and I've been the hard-ass Israeli. Okay? The big problem you had here was you had two big problems. One, you couldn't get American Jews to agree on the definition of anti-Semitism. Couldn't. And the second, even if they agreed, they couldn't agree how to fight it. Again, thanks to Hamas, we've solved the problem. We now know, we have determined unassailably that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. All right? Even now, the White House is saying it. You can't deny it. It's there. All right? People who are protesting for Palestine are talking about putting Jews in ovens. Hello? Ask them whether anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And I think there's a greater sense that way we fight it. If in the past the big debate was between me, if someone said something anti-Semitic, I'd say fire them. And other American Jews would say, no, it's an educational moment. We should explain, what anti-Semitism means. No, it's a serious debate. I've had it, even with leaders of the American Jewish community. I think we've determined that as ready. This is not an education moment. This is a moment for fighting. This is a moment for standing. We know exactly what we're fighting against now. And I hope we maintain this sense. I do, because it's absolutely crucial. Yeah.
And I was wondering if you read it.
I did not read it. I was in the air, but I heard about it. So
it's
tell me.
It's a very interesting article. It talks about blame, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of blame when this thing is over, which is obviously we all hope is soon. But it speaks to our 44th president as being a source of this problem.
Oh, there's no question. Again, I told you I love Joe Biden. But to say that the administration screwed up royally, but not just them. It began with the Obama administration. I mean, I have a Substack, new thing. I don't have to deal with editors anymore. I'm my own editor. And it's called Clarity. It's free. Get it. I had an article the other day. It's now coming out. It's being reprinted in Barry Weiss's Substack in Honesty Today. It's called the Dirty Harry moment. If those of you who remember Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood. Pull the trigger, make my day. And it's about the history of America's relationship with Iran over the last 15 years and how that history helped contributed to this moment. And it began with a theory that I encountered in Washington, and it was this. The United States, for previous decades, had been betting on the wrong horse in the Middle East, or the wrong horses. They bet on the Israeli horse. And what we did was build a lot of settlements and spit in America's eye. And the Americans bet on the Sunni horse. And what the Sunnis did, the Saudis did, was turn around and give us 9/11. Wrong horse. But in the Middle East, there was a good horse. It was a pro-American population, very sophisticated imagination, had a bit of a problematic government with a very pesky nuclear program. And if we could just sort of get over that little pesky nuclear program, we could pivot toward Iran, and America could get the hell out of the Middle East. That was, and you're going to laugh at, but this was really there. And I saw how it played out. And so over the course of the years, in that effort to reached that agreement with Iran, America was willing to overlook just unspeakable provocations by Iran, including an attempt to assassinate me in Washington, in downtown Washington, all right? But, shooting at American soldiers, shooting at American ships, taking prisoners, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. They were so determined to get to empower and enrich Iran. And yes, you see how it ended up. I will say this about that policy, though, and that is, as critical as I've was of Obama, certainly in his positions on Iran, and sort of accused him of being naive and thinking that if you treated the Iranians with respect and you incentivized them economically, they would become, quote unquote, a responsible regional power. We made the exact same mistake with Hamas. Exact same mistake. We thought if we gave them a lot of money and treated them with little respect, they'd be okay. But guess what? Whether it's that White House or our own government, the Israeli government, we all failed to, as human beings probably, it's a human failing, by the way. It's not a failing of intelligence, it's a failing of civility, of character. We could not believe that people were so indelibly, immutably evil. It's hard for us. It's hard for us as Jews to believe in that absolute evil that cannot be, it was irredeemable, that evil. And that was true of Iran, it was true of Hamas. And so yes, they bear fruit. Anyway, the article you'll see on Barry's Substack, but get my Substack, Dirty Harry moment. Make my day. Someone's old enough. I see the people are laughing. They're old enough to remember that movie. 1971. Yeah.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, I hear you.
You hear me? Okay. My name is Andy Alpern. I'm originally from Chicago. We live in Tzfat. Currently.
I don't know if I can hear you very well. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
It's an echo. That's why. It's not that you're not loud enough. It's an echo. That is better. Yeah.
I'm originally from Chicago, but I live in Tzfat.
Tzfat.
Currently. We're here because we don't have a safe room in our house, which is 130 years old. And there's nothing in the neighborhood. If we talk about failure of planning or whatever. Our issue is we were sitting around in the first 2 weeks of the war, waiting for missiles to fall out of the sky, going into our safest room, whatever. That's why we're here. Our family and our community invited us to be here. But we're losing it. We're not home. We want to go home. Our kids are in 11th grade in high school. They want to study their rugby. They want to be with their friends. We're trying to keep our family safe, and it was really my wife's, I'm not blaming, but it was her.
Go ahead.
She comes from a family of Holocaust survivors, but if you would have talked to us a month and a half ago, I would have done anything to leave Israel, given what was going on in the country internally, and she would never leave. This is ongoing. As soon as all this happened, she felt abandoned, as many of us have, by the system, the government, whatever you want to call it. At this point, our main concern is Lebanon. We're 15 kilometers from the border.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking you, first of all,
Ask.
I really respect your opinions and your stance and your knowledge and your perspective. I'm not asking you what the solution is, but what the hell do you think is going to happen? I mean,
Okay.
What do you see as the best option?
Great question.
Because that's our main question,
Yeah.
and the question of everybody in Tzfat and everybody in the north.
Oh, okay. And I'd be happy to answer that. I'll be happy to answer that as candidly as possible. First of all, I love Tzfat. I spent a big chunk of my childhood in Tzfat. Wonderful place. Again, the Substack, Clarity. One of the first articles I published was called If Not Now. And it was a rough translation of an article I had published in the Hebrew press in the first few days of the war. And the argument went like this. We're attacking the wrong people. We can contain Hamas. Hamas wasn't going anywhere. It was trapped. And we can continue to hit Hamas from the air, from the ground, from the sea, keep on hitting them. and we should turn all of our attention to the north. We had 360,000 reservists mobilized. That's, by the way, roughly the size of this force that the coalition sent into Iraq in 2003. We had 2 massive naval forces off the Lebanese coast. All right. We had an immense amount then of international legitimacy. Hezbollah has about 15 times the number of rockets that Hamas has. The rockets are bigger, longer range, and many of them are accurate. That is, they can be directed by a joystick. They don't just go up and down. They can be directed at oil refineries, at airports, at Dimona, okay? And it has a terrorist fighting force, which is larger than Hamas's and which has spent the last decade massacring Syrians. And if you saw what they did to the Syrians, imagine what they do to us. And this was the opportunity. I wrote in the article, let's focus on Hezbollah because we're going to have to do it eventually. Because now we know what having a jihadist terrorist force on your border, what it can mean, what it can do. And how can you tell people to go live in Sfat or live in Metula or live in Kiryat Shmone when across the border you know what these people can do, what these monsters can do. I don't want to call them animals because it insults the animal kingdom. Right? And the article came out in the Hebrew press, and I went on the Israeli news, and you know, these panels, you have these panel discussions where you got to fight everybody. And I mentioned, I talked about the article, and everyone sort of jumped on me and laughed at me. 2-3 weeks later, it turns out that the Defense Department, our defense minister, tried to advance the exact same argument, and was turned down by the Prime Minister. I don't know who else turned it down. So I wasn't the only one thinking this way. Okay, so the decision was made, Hamas first, in the hope that if we smash Hamas sufficiently, then Hezbollah will get the message. But there's another possibility, that Hezbollah will wait. And the Hezbollah will say, we'll wait for the Israeli army to be in Gaza for a month and a half. The soldiers are tired. They're expending ammunition at an enormous rate, and you're getting low. And then we'll hit Israel. Then we'll hit Israel. Keep in mind, you know, Hezbollah, being a Sunni organization, is watching the Sunnis take on the Jews all alone. And how much kind of credibility they're going to have when it's all over. Everyone's going to say, where were you guys? Now, Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, gave a speech the other night where he seemed to indicate that Hezbollah was not going to get involved. But what can I say? I can't think that Hassan Nasrallah is a paragon of truth. Okay? And the whole thing could be diversion. It could be a diversion. Which is why the United States is sending additional naval assets into the Middle East, now a nuclear submarine, all the time to deter Hezbollah. I think it's clear that the United States does not want us to open up a second front, because that would mean the United States getting involved militarily and more deeply. But I honestly, Andy, I don't know how we go back to status quo ante. I just don't. I don't know how you go back to Sfat and raise your kids in Sfat with that over the border. You know, in 1962, John F. Kennedy was willing to go to nuclear war to get Russian missiles out of Cuba. You tell me that any country in the world can put up with that type of threat looming over their heads? I don't. And we have this opportunity now. I don't know where they're going to get an opportunity again like this. 360,000 reservists who are trained now and ready to go. I don't know. So I didn't get my druthers, as it will, by having Hezbollah first, but I think Hezbollah has to be left for last. We have to change our reality. We have to change our sense of security, because I don't know, your wife and your kids, I don't know, will they live under that? I don't know if I would. Listen, my kids are a little bit further south. I got a daughter and 3 grandkids in the Galilee, and I wouldn't. I don't feel safe. Don't. The covenant, remember? There's a gentleman down here.
So, does this work? Yeah. Oh, I got a good one. Okay. So I have a question about the diaspora. So I'm a med student at University of Illinois, and SJP on our campus put out a flyer that had like a paraglider on it, so pretty clear Hamas imagery there. So just in reference to the clear kind of domestic terrorism issue that we have in the United States among young people, right? So like the Harris group did the poll with Harvard that came out a few weeks ago that kind of stratified by age attitudes towards the
age
the
and party
conflict, right?
affiliation. Yeah.
Right, and I'm sure you might have
Generation Z, gotta love them.
Right, Gen Z. So there are a few concerning things in there, obviously, when you parse the numbers. But one of which was that 51% of them thought that the attacks were justified by Hamas. Right. So my question for you is, how specifically are we supposed to address the future of Judaism in America? Because the trend lines are pretty clear. I mean, to me, I'm kind of internally negotiating, is it them just being young and ignorant, or is this actually the emerging attitude that we're allowed to openly support Hamas in academia? And just, I mean, these are going to be our future colleagues. So, like, what actionable items do you think American Jews should pursue to protect Jewry?
Well, I think I've mentioned about what you have to do about fighting back. I mean, what real option do you have? Right? No one, the anti-Semites are not asking you whether you are a Republican Jew or a Democratic Jew or a Reform Jew or an Orthodox Jew. Does this sound familiar? No one's examining your political or religious tzitzit. Okay? They're coming after you because you're a Jew. And that's telling you something. So, you're not the first Jewish community in history to face this type of situation. And you have basically two options. Because ignoring is not one of them, okay? 'Cause they're not going away. One option is to fight back in every way you can. And, I'm saying militarily, but maybe, fighting back. I work with a wonderful organization here in Chicago called Secure Community Network, and which is, whether you know it or not, is guarding the synagogue tonight and monitoring threats to 12,400 Jewish institutions across North America. It's 90 former FBI and law enforcement officials, overwhelmingly not Jewish, by the way, who are completely devoted and committed to protecting you, every one of you here, and your kids are in the Hebrew schools. That's one way, supporting SCAN, S-E-N. But, and fighting the way I talked about, in the press and in the halls of government, in the classrooms, everywhere. The other alternative is to do what Jews have done throughout all the ages, which is move to Israel. And the last interview I gave on the Israeli press was just before I left, I guess yesterday, was to say we have to prepare ourselves for the possibility of a major wave of Aliyah. And maybe, I don't know how much from the American Jewish community, but certainly from Europe. Certainly from Europe. I'm talking to people in London saying, there's just no future here. No future here. So, those are the Jewish options. Is there any comfort in knowing that you are not the first person to face those options? But they are. Mm-hmm. P.S. I want to say one more thing, and this will maybe shock you. I'm not the only one to say this. We in Israel, in my bomb shelter, in our bomb shelter with the bombs going off right over our heads, we feel more secure than many of you feel here. Jeff's here. Yeah. Oh, hi. Right there.
Two-parter, since it's your last one. In Lebanon, you pointed to the U.S. naval assistance that's out there. What assurance does Israel have that the United States would actually activate those ships in the event Hezbollah attacked Israel? Yeah. And second part is, you're triangulating between Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. And I'm curious to see how you would deal with Iran given the other two factors.
If I understand it, how do you do this up here, guys? I have such a time hearing them. It's a big echo. You're actually better off asking if you can without a microphone. I understood Andy better than I've understood any question so far. So I'm guessing here. About the naval groups. When they showed up, and keep in mind, these are what's called strike carrier forces. So you have the two most modern aircraft carriers in the American naval arsenal. It's the Ford and the Eisenhower. Together, they can carry up to 150 warplanes. That's like the size of the IDF. And around them, it's not just the aircraft carriers. There are frigates, destroyers, submarines. God, these are huge armadas, huge. And now they're being augmented by additional naval assets. And the big question in Israel, and certainly in the Israeli press, was, will Biden pull the trigger? And my response was unequivocally yes, he will pull the trigger. He doesn't want to put boots on the ground. But if Hezbollah opens up with 150,000 rockets at us, and we'll be getting something like 4,000 to 6,000 rockets a day, and no amount of Iron Dome, no amount of David Sling, that's the intermediate level, Arrow 2, Arrow 3 is going to stop that. Just isn't. And keep in mind, Iron Dome is 90% effective, which means for every 100 rockets they fire you, 10 are going to get through. And if you're firing thousands, that's hundreds are going to get through. So we can't do this. These ships have 3 major anti-missile facilities on them. They have the THAAD system, the Aegis system, and the Patriot system. We're going to use them. They took down these 3 rockets from Yemen a couple weeks ago. And those rockets were big rockets. They took down drones aid for us to do. So yeah, he'll pull the trigger. And we could be, in that certain scenario, we will be one drone or one missile away from a regional conflict, which means if one of these drones get through and hits an American warship, or a missile hits a warship, or a missile or drone hits an American base and causes a great number of casualties, we're in a different ballgame. And I think Joe Biden will pull the trigger. Your second question, if I understood it, was? Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to go back to, again, I'm not an ambassador, so for years now I've been an advocate of the hit the snake school, hit the head of the snake school. We have for now, oh God, for 15 years at least, have been playing Iran's game. Iran gets their proxies to shoot at us. We shoot back at the proxies. We actually don't deter the proxies very much, but we get blamed for being war criminals because the proxies are hiding behind their civilian populations. Iran gets away scot-free every single time. Doesn't pay any price. And I think we have to change that equation. I think, for years I've been thinking, that every rocket that comes across from Hamas or Hezbollah, our response doesn't have to be against Hamas and Hezbollah alone. It should be against Iran. We should take out an oil refinery every single time. And Iran is not, again, I think you should just stop there. Oil refinery. Jeff, you have a question? That was your question. Okay.
Mike, I'm going to give you a question because it's come over and over from, we asked for, what is the long-term prognosis if the rest of the world starts to refuse to support Israel?
The rest of the world has stopped doing it?
And that, by the way, there was another addition to that. What do you do if the United States stops supporting Israel?
Okay. What if the rest of the world? Well, we have, it's a mixed bag right now. If you, in the past, you know, we used to say there's no such thing as anti-Semitism in China. China is now officially anti-Semitic. They've just wiped Israel off Chinese maps. Amazing. In contrast, our biggest problem was with the EU, which reaches, which used to condemn us pretty regularly because they have to operate on a consensual basis. You have to have all 28 members of the EU to vote against us. They can't do it anymore. Because there are countries like Italy and England, and now even France, that understand something very fundamental. That is, if we don't win in this war, they're next. They're next. The French really know this. They're next. They're dead. And so we've received support, certainly from Great Britain and Italy, and surprisingly from France. Not as great, of course, but they're French. But surprisingly. So it's changing. So we've had a hard time with China. We've had a better time with Europe. With the United States, so far, if you look at the polls, again, you've seen these polls, it shows roughly 3/4 plus of the American public are with Israel on this. And it breaks down. There's more Republicans than there is Democrats, and if you get to Generation Z, which I hate to see Generation Y at this point, really, then it really goes below 50%. Then 50%. And that's where you get these people saying, artificial intelligence, they never really raped, they never really butchered, they did this, it was all made up. But, you don't know what Generation Z is going to look like in 20, 30 years. You don't know. They actually may understand something about the world. So I don't know. I'm right now, I am fairly confident that we're going to have a modicum of support for a while. But it's not infinite. It's not definite. And one of the things I fear is what I call the Kfar Kana syndrome. Listen to this. Those of you with a little bit of memory. 1996, we had an operation against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon called the Operation Grapes of Wrath, the only Israeli operation named after a quote from the New Testament. Right? They figured that out too late. I'm not kidding you. I was in that operation. They kept on asking me, where is that in the Bible? We can't find it in the Torah. It's not in the Torah. Someone went and checked. It's in the book of Matthew, right? And during that operation, we were doing very well until one of our tank shells hit a UN shelter and killed 100 people, civilians. And the entire operation failed, and Hezbollah won. Scoot ahead 10 years, Second Lebanon War. I'm in that one, too. Tank shell in 96 hit the building was in a place called Kfar Kana in southern Lebanon. In Kfar Kana in 2006, we did the exact same thing. One of our planes hit a building collapsed, killed 100 people. The whole war changed. We are one drone or one missile away from the United States getting involved in a regional conflict. We are one tank shell, or one artillery shell, or one aerial bomb away from another Kfar Kana. And you almost saw it happen with the Achli hospital issue. If we had bombed that hospital like everyone claimed we did and killed 500 people like everyone claimed we did, we'd be in a different situation today. We dodged a rocket, literally. But it can happen, especially as we go into this very densely built-up area of Gaza City, and you've got a lot of troops, a lot of tired troops, a lot of scared troops shooting all over the place. It can happen. So that could be an inflection point. I hope we don't read it. Look at all these wonderful. It's like Israelis with all these questions.
We have a question over here.
Right. Yes.
So my question is, it's kind of a similar question, but it's a follow-up question.
Can you try without the microphone? I really can't hear. That's so much better.
Kind of a similar, but kind of a follow-up question. So obviously we know that Israel has already been condemned within international organizations. So can you just give us a sense, though, of how is this going to play out? What levers are these governing entities going to try to pull to start exerting pressure on Israel to do things that the country obviously can't do? What will that look like in the months ahead?
Okay, that's a good question. It could be pressure in the Security Council and the General Assembly. Now, General Assembly they can't enforce General Assembly resolutions, but they can the Security Council. It could be boycotts. It could be boycotts of certainly, boycotts of goods, boycotts of business, not just academic boycotts. It can be declaration of Israelis as kind of war criminals, so Israelis would not be able to travel abroad. I've had warnings like that about me. Don't go visit South Africa. Don't visit Ireland even at one point. That type of. And the biggest lever that somebody would be on the resupply of ammunition. So we are expending ammunition at a very high rate. And usually underneath the state of Israel are buried warehouses that contain about $2 billion worth of pre-positioned U.S. military equipment. These are put there by George Bush after the Iraq War, supposedly to serve American forces in the Middle East. They're not there anymore. Everyone knew from the beginning it wasn't for them, it was really for us. And every time we go to war, we ask for the keys to these warehouses. They let us go into the warehouse. We take what we need. We write it down. We pay for it. It was only one time we were turned down. That was when Obama in 2014 thought we were killing too many Palestinians in Gaza and didn't give us Hellfire missiles. But pretty good. Now, a lot of that, those warehouses have been, to a certain extent, I can't tell you exactly, have been emptied out by the Ukraine war, including a vast number of artillery shells. And that's going to affect our ability to even act up north. And that could be a lever, saying, I saw how it worked in 2014. Someone could say, you don't agree to a ceasefire, you don't agree to humanitarian pauses. You know that 50 caliber machine gun bullet stuff you wanted? Not so fast, kind of thing. Just saying. Anybody? Go, please. Yeah, I might as well do this, right? Just don't use the microphone because I can hear much better without it.
I had a question as a follow-up to a comment you made at the beginning of your remarks about the Abraham Accords and how you felt war was coming when the agreement with Saudi Arabia became public, even though I'm sure it had quietly been going on for a long time. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the countries that had signed those accords, where you see their role? Will those continue? What role will Saudi Arabia play in maybe the future governing Gaza?
Well, these accords so far are holding. They're strained. And they're strained because the populations are overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian and the governments are overwhelmingly pro-Israeli. And these governments face twin threats. They face the threat of Sunni extremism in the form of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, which is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Shiite extremism in the form of Iran. And there's only one country that's standing up to both of them right now, and that's us. So they're not about to, cut off that hand that's literally not feeding them but protecting them. The populations, though, are on the rise, and so these poor sheikhs and rulers have to sort of balance this. They have to straddle this. It's not easy. So what they're doing is condemning us publicly, but privately saying, "Go get them." And this happens again and again. There's nothing new about this phenomenon. You think the Jordanians are telling us anything different? And the Jordanians are the most wickedly anti-Israel regime going, but behind the scenes they're all saying, "Kill these guys. Please don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop." Egyptians hate Hamas, hate Hamas. Are they condemning us? Yeah, they're condemning us. All right? We're just going to have to live with that. But the Jordanian peace and the Israeli and the Egyptian peace now, Egyptian peace is coming up on 45 years. And that's a lot of terror and a lot of wars this thing has sustained without breaking. I mean it, including the Egyptian revolution in 2011. It came very close to breaking. So at the end of the day, it's about interests. It's not about love. It's about interests, strategic interests. And those interests are very real, and they're not changing. I think when the smoke clears, I think the Saudis will move back again to the process of rapprochement. I do. And, I don't know if it's going to be a Saudi flag flying over, anywhere, but certainly closer relationships. People have asked, one of the most frequently asked questions I get is about the day after. What's our end game? And there's a lot of discussions about this now. I think it's clear that, first of all, this operation is not going to take a week. It's not going to take months. It's going to take many months. It may even take years. And that we are not going to relinquish security control over Gaza for a very long time. I think we have to make a cordon sanitaire around our borders, that nobody in Gaza can get within 2 miles of our border. I think we have to demilitarize the Gaza Strip, make sure there's not a single rocket in there. We have to de-Hamasize the Gaza Strip. That's going to be hard. We can't kill the idea of Hamas, but we can degrade Hamas, make it much less dangerous. We can internationalize Gaza. This is crucial. Gaza must no longer be an Israeli problem, because, in fact, it is not an Israeli problem. Look, the fact that the American forces are in the Middle East tonight because of Hamas shows that it's an international problem, right? So the solution should be international. And that international should have, I think, that solution should have a large Arab or inter-Arab component. Maybe Saudi forces there, maybe Emirati forces there. Believe me, they'll be a lot tougher than we will. And I think that should be our goal. Demilitarization, internationalization, and separation. That sounds good. I should quote that. I have never done that before. Well, who wants the last question? How can I?
So kind of my question going along with that is, what's the end game with Hezbollah and Lebanon and Syria, and how do you attack that problem? Assuming there's a military confrontation, how do you find the leader? Who's going to lead that region? What's the day after from a governance perspective?
I don't know, because Lebanon is a non-functioning country. Lebanon country is an oxymoron. And it's very difficult also, because it's clear we're not going to make the same mistake we made in 2006. 2006 we declared war against Hamas and not a war against Lebanon, even though there's really no distinction between Lebanon and Hezbollah. There's no distinction between Hezbollah and Lebanon. They're the same. We made an artificial distinction in 2006 and it tied our hands. Next time you go to war against Hezbollah, it's going to be against Lebanon. And that creates its own difficulties, because you cannot bomb Lebanon back into the Stone Age, because Lebanon is already in the Stone Age. All right, really. And what can you do to Lebanon that's going to disincentivize them? it would be a brutal contest. Of those 150,000 rockets, about 130,000 are embedded in some 200 Lebanese villages. You got the family rocket in the living room. The roof opens up, the rocket goes out and hits Haifa. We'll have no choice but to send our army in, village, village, house, house. And those families will be kept in those houses by Hezbollah, because the same thing, Hezbollah wants us to kill those families, wants us to be branded war criminals. We'll have absolutely no choice. But I think we can do the same thing to Hezbollah we're doing to Hamas right now, which is degrading it. Can we get rid of Hezbollah? Can we get rid of Hezbollah, the idea of Hezbollah? No, we cannot. But listen, there was once a country called Nazi Germany. There are still neo-Nazis running around, right? God bless them. Lots of neo-Nazis, but they do not have the power that they would have if there was actually a country behind them. They don't have a country. And the people who will continue the idea of Hamas and the idea of Hezbollah will be much weaker, like the people who carry the idea of ISIS, if there's not a country behind them, if not an entity behind them. And that has to be our goal. The most important thing to remember, and I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One is that this is not a war between Hamas and Israel. It's not even a war against the Jews. This is a war of civilization against evil, of civilization against darkness. And some people in the world are internalizing that, are understanding that if we lose, they're next. Second thought, and that's about Israel. You know, this crazy silver lining of Hamas that we owe Hamas a thank you. Israel, and I say this without reservation, has the strongest, most resilient, most creative, most inspiring society on the planet Earth. Nothing like it. And in the airport, when was it? When were we in the airport? A couple hours ago, last night. And they have TV going, and they're interviewing a young major, who was just insanely handsome. And he's in his battle, and he's like some special forces guy, and he's talking about how on the first day he left his family, I told my wife I'm going off, and my family totally supports me that I'm down here. And he's talking about we're going to defend this country, and we're going to make sure that the evacuees get back to their homes, and we're going to defeat terror. We're going to do what it takes. And I'm thinking, who are these people? How did we come to make such human beings? You know, and I see them all the time. I see them it was those soldiers I saw in my old paratrooper unit, these beautiful, beautiful children with rifles who are going off to fight without a moment's hesitation, without saying, oh God, why am I doing this? Why am I here? What's in it for me? Who are these people? We've made the society an extraordinary, extraordinary society. I could not be, as sometimes as frustrated and sickened I am by our government, I am just overwhelmingly inspired and impressed by our people. What a people. What a people. And because of those people, we're going to pull through this. We're going to win. Of course we're going to win. Of course we're going to win. And we're going to be, of course, at a price, at a terrible price. Not going to stop that price, but we're all determined. Because we have no choice, because we have no other homeland, because we are Jews and we're going to stay Jews, and we've been around for 4,000 years, and there's a reason. There's a reason. Because of all of you. Thank you. Toda. Emet toda. And it's Allah. Just in one last word, Joe. We've been doing a lot of calls with Ellie Beer over the last couple of weeks, because we have to raise this money. It's absolutely crucial. Again, every dollar is a human life, and every time Ellie gets on, I say, Ellie, you really look like crap. You look like someone who hasn't slept in 4.5 weeks, and you see him now. He actually looks a lot better than this. What he has done, what all these people have gone through, is just amazing, and that's the spirit of this country. Anything you can do for Hatzalah, please. for us.
Please sit, we're not done.
Thank you.
Between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. That's how quickly a United Hatzalah volunteer can be on the scene saving a life. Instead of asking you to try and hold your breath for 90 seconds, I'm going to ask you for less than 3 minutes of your time. My name is Lisa Beth Gansberg, and I'm the Midwest Regional Director, very proudly for United Hatzalah. It's so hard to describe what it's like to work for an organization like you've heard about without being emotional. And it is unlimited in its rewards. I get to tell people that I save lives and I help save lives all day long. But I never dreamt that I would be with you here tonight. Not like this. Now we are not only answering 2,000 routine calls daily, but we are on the front lines, and we have not been able to save some of our own United Hatzalah volunteers. It is a privilege to stand before you representing 7,000 volunteers throughout Israel, and it is my honor to dedicate this evening to those in the United Hatzalah family that we have lost and all the others. Please take a moment to recognize that. The mission of United Hatzalah is to save lives, but it is also of hope. You've heard that a few times already tonight. To accomplish our mission, men, women, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all work together side by side as a united team with one goal: to save lives. We could not do this without your support. Please consider making a gift. It's the gift of life. There are pledge envelopes on the table outside, as well as with the ushers when you leave. Also, you can go to israelrescue.org 24/7. Now it is more important than ever. Michael has shared with you tonight how important it is for the Jewish community, for Israel, to survive. Please keep that in mind. Eli said it best if you saw him before, but admittedly, he was very tired, and he apologizes for the mispronunciation. He filmed that in the wee hours of the morning after he'd finished a shift, though he truly has not slept since the war began. Again, I would like to thank Anshe Emet for their hospitality this evening, Rabbi Siegel, Cantor Brook, Mimi, your entire team at Anshe Emet, and everybody who is here tonight. Being here means you care. Being here means we can make a difference. And of course, and I'm going to get yelled at, Jeff Ader, for his unwavering dedication and commitment to United Hatzalah, not only in Chicago, but on our boards. And to Ambassador Oren, thank you so much for joining on this evening, sharing your thoughts, helping us better understand how we can support Israel and how we can be better people. To everyone here tonight, on behalf of United Hatzalah, welcome to our family. Thank you again, and now I ask Rabbi Siegel to join us in offering a blessing.
What a remarkable evening. Thank you, Michael, thank you. And Lisa, thank you for the work you do each and every day. When we end a service, we always pray for peace. Even though in the history of humankind there has not been one day of peace. But before we can offer that prayer, we need to offer a prayer for the Chayalei Sahal. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarevcha Rachel v'Leah. May God, who blessed our ancestors, we rise. Thank you. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless the members of Israel Defense Forces and its security services who stand guard over our land and the cities of our God, from the Lebanese border to the Egyptian desert, from the Mediterranean Sea to the approach of the Arava, and wherever else they are, on land, in air, and at sea. May the Holy One, blessed be God, protect and deliver them from all trouble and distress, affliction and illness, and send blessing and success to all the work of their hands. May God help them subdue our enemies, crown them with deliverance and victory. And let us say, Amen. We cannot offer a prayer for peace unless we offer a prayer on behalf of the hostages. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarevcha Rachel v'Leah. May God, who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, David, and Solomon, bless, protect, and guard the members of Israel's defense forces missing in action or held captive, and the other captives among our brethren, the whole house of Israel, who are in distress or captivity. The Americans, foreign workers who are being held. We pray on their behalf. May the Holy One, blessed be God, have compassion on them. Help our Israeli brothers and sisters take them out from darkness and the shadow of death. May He deliver them from their distress and bring them swiftly back to their families' embrace. And to that, let us say Amen. And now we offer a prayer for peace.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru amen. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael chai. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am
Lila Tov.
Lila Tov.